Welcome to a new series in a new year, 2022. We are beginning a new series called Arizona Vote 2022. Did you know? There are new things, new rules, new changes in Arizona, and we would like to address those and beyond. There's lots of information, good information about the elections, and this is a subject that is very active. There's always new things, and to help us understand changes, I would like to introduce Gina Roberts. Gina Roberts is with Clean Elections. She's always been so great to give us her time and dedication to inform our audience. Gina, thank you so much for joining our show.
Hi, David. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to join your show. And, it's always a pleasure. And I appreciate AARP reaching out to help inform their audience about upcoming elections. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
All right. We should have some new things that we are going to be announcing. We also have my colleague, Brendan Blake. He is the Associate State Director for Advocacy in Arizona. Welcome, Brendan.
Thanks, David. It's always a pleasure, and hopefully we can just give some useful information to everybody today.
Perfect. So I am naming, let me say that this is a Facebook series. And the show today, which is number one, is voting in the Constitution, in our democracy, and in actuality, because it could be in the Constitution and it's part of our democracy, but it doesn't always materialize to the actuality of our daily life. So we really want to encourage people to vote, to register to vote. We would like to talk about an introduction, which is basically what I'm doing. And then we're going to go through voting changes in Arizona. This is very important, voting changes and some other information. And we're going to just briefly touch on the Constitution, our democracy, voting in the Constitution, the history of voting, and voting in Arizona. So let's start with that. And I'm going to ask Gina. Gina, help us understand. There's been some changes and a lot of noise, I might add. And we really want to be clear about what's going on with this active early voting list. Take it away for us.
Sure. So previously, we would call it the permanent early voting list here in Arizona. It has since been renamed to active early voting list, and the active is what's key here. So in Arizona, voters can sign up for the active early voting list. And when they do that, then prior to every election that they're eligible to vote in, 27 days prior, the county will automatically mail them their early ballot. So the voter doesn't have to put in multiple requests. They can just do that one-time sign up for the active early voting list. So what that means now is the voters automatically going to get sent their early ballot to them. What's important, though, is that in order to remain on the active early voting list, the voter has to vote at least one of those early ballots over a course of 4 elections in order to remain on the active early voting list. So basically, you're going to stay on that list as long as you're continuing to vote your early ballot. You'll remain on the active early voting list. And as long as you vote at least one ballot over the course of 4 elections, then you're good. You'll still stay on that list. The county will continue to automatically mail it to you. Now, what happens if you don't do that? Let's say that your county sends you a ballot for the 2022 primary, the 2022 general. You don't vote either of those. We advance forward and we're looking at 2024 now, the primary and general, and you didn't vote in either of those, that early ballot. Then what that means is it will trigger a notice coming from the county, and they'll ask you, hey, do you still want to remain on this active early voting list? Because, we see that you didn't vote any of your early ballots in the past 4 elections. So at that point, the voter can either respond and confirm their preference. And if they fail to respond, then the county can remove them from the active early voting list. But David, one thing I want to point out that's very important to understand, it is not canceling the voter's registration. They still remain an active registered voter. It just means the county will no longer automatically mail them their ballot.
So basically, 2 primaries, 2 general, 4 years actually, right?
Yes.
If they have to vote at least one time, and that suffices to remain on the early voting list.
That is correct. Now,
Not too bad.
Yeah, and there are some local elections that may be occurring. That a voter is eligible to vote in if it's a local city or town, and so if they are getting mailed a ballot for that, then those local elections too can count as one of those 4 elections. So it
Great.
just really depends on the voter's circumstance, but it takes a while to be removed from it. But again, you can always sign back up, and it is not impacting your voter registration.
And this is the law of the land now in Arizona, correct?
That is correct. That is the
And
current law.
and just to reiterate, it doesn't automatically remove you. They'll send you a notice, and then if you don't reply, then it becomes it goes into effect.
That is correct. So the county
Okay,
will attempt to reach you. They'll send you a notice. You'll have an opportunity to respond and let them know your preference. If they don't hear back from you, and again, if you didn't vote at least one of those 4 early ballots, then they will remove you from the active early voting list.
great information. And I would like to ask Brendan. Brendan, there's so many deadlines, right? To register to vote, and then to register to receive a ballot on the mail. And we picked up this information from the Secretary of State's website. Just any comments that you would like to share on this particular slide? I think this is great information.
Yeah, I'll just go ahead and say that, we've got a lot of deadlines coming up. Some of them are coming up or have already passed for these local elections here, but the biggest elections obviously are coming up later this year, with the primary happening in August and the general in November. So you've got plenty of time to register to vote, to request a mail-in ballot, and it's going to be it should be an interesting election cycle, as it has been for the last few years in Arizona, and I'm sure we're going to have a few more interesting races that are happening. I will just reiterate, though, that some of the more important races happen at the primary level, and so it's very important for people to vote in the primary elections.
Perfect. Well, if you are watching this video, feel free to pause the video so you can kind of see the dates, but they're there. We don't want to review all the dates. I believe most folks know that there are deadlines, and it's very important to understand those deadlines so that we are able to vote. Let us go to the next slide, and I would like Gina, are these the races that are going to take place in 2022 in Arizona?
Yeah, that's a great question, David. Actually, what's going to be on my ballot in 2022? And these are a list of all of the candidate races that will be up. And Brendan kind of touched on this, but we are in what we call midterm elections. These are the midterm elections, and that basically means we're in an election where we're not voting for president. And, we typically see voter participation rates drop in midterms. But as Brendan was saying, in our primaries this year, you're going to see some very important races on your ballot. And this list here talks about them. So we do have at the federal level, we have one open U.S. Senate seat. And then we also have all 9 of our congressional seats there. So we're
Wow.
talking about Arizona's representation in D.C. here. So very important. And then at the state level, we have an open seat for governor. We have an open seat for secretary of state. We have all of the statewide that will be on the ballot. So attorney general, state treasurer, superintendent of public instruction, corporation commissioner, state mine inspector. So lots of important races there. And then, of course, our state legislature. So we have 30 districts here in Arizona. And for all 30 districts, voters will be considering their state senator, it's vote for 1, and their state representatives, which are vote for 2. So again, these midterms elections are very important because these are our state and local elections here that impact voters directly.
And if I
Wow.
could add, David, do you mind if
By
I
all
add
means,
something?
Brandon, go ahead.
I think Gina brought up something that's really great, is that in Arizona, we may consider them nationally midterm elections, but for us in Arizona, on the off years that are midterm elections where we're not voting for president, we're voting for the leader of our state, as well as the entire executive branch, including the Secretary of State and the other races that Gina mentioned. So it's important that we vote in our midterms, because for Arizona specifically, those are a lot of the powerful positions that are up for election.
All right, so let's move on. Let's see. So basically, we're close to ending our show. We don't want to make this show too long, but our Constitution, it's in the Constitution, the three branches of government. As we know, we have a representation. How is it called? Representative democracy. Is that what is the technical term?
That's right.
Right?
Yes. Yep. The United States is a representative democracy.
Right. And so obviously it's part of our constitution, it's our democracy. But let us take us through just some concepts. I mean, I always feel that gradually we lose sight is, I think, is the right word, of all the price that has been paid for us to have a democracy, the constitution. And a lot of times we don't value the voting, and it's a lot of people fought for this. So any thoughts? And then if you can share some of the history of voting, who was allowed to vote first, and the progress. And even in Arizona, how are we doing with voting? Are we registering to vote? I mean, percentages, etc. Take it away for us.
Thank you, David, for acknowledging basically all of the the struggles that our country has seen to get to where we are this day and age when it comes to voting. And of course, there's still lots of discussions about how we can continue to improve our electoral system and improve access to the ballot box. So I appreciate that we recognize the struggles that our nation has gone through to get here today. And voting, when we talk about it, I mean, it stems all the way back to Article 1 of the United States Constitution. But I do want to kind of touch up on, we talked about how the United States is a representative democracy, but what does that even mean, really? We throw that word out there, but I think it's so important to consider because it's the root for participation, right? So if we talk about democracy, there's two types, right? We have a direct democracy. And a direct democracy that's really where every citizen is voting on all of the decisions, right? But as we mentioned, we have a representative democracy. And that means that voters, we are electing representatives to represent us in government, to vote on our behalf, to work for the people, right? They're elected by the people for the people. And they make the very important decisions, which is, as we were talking about, at the midterms here, we're electing, as Brendan said, the leader of our state. So there's a lot of important decisions made on every ballot. And, when we talk about direct democracy, I think, that's reflected in our citizens' right to do initiatives and referendums. And so we see a lot of that happen here in Arizona. And I think just kind of going back to the basics there is really important as we consider that, because at the end of the day, voter participation, that's what we need to ensure that we continue to have that democracy.
Definitely. Any thought, Brendan, on this?
I think Gina covered it really well. I will just add that, it's so important that we vote in our elections. It's so important that we stay informed about the issues and about the candidates. I feel that, politics in general can be exhausting for people, but it's something that it's worth digging into a little bit to learn more about who your representatives and senators are at both the state and the federal level. It's important to note that a lot of the laws that impact your daily lives get passed at the state legislature. And so those are the laws that will impact you on a day-to-day basis. And so those are the representatives and senators that you need to be paying attention to, especially given that they're up for re-election every other year. So that's all I'll add.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Gina.
Thank you, David. And I just wanted to, touch base too, for people who are interested, fun facts. We talked about, David, you had mentioned the history too of elections. And we can look all the way back to the 15th Amendment, which gave African-American men the right to vote. And we have the 19th Amendment, which gave American women the right to vote. And then there have been more changes throughout our history. There's the 24th Amendment, which dealt with eliminating poll taxes. We had the 26th Amendment, which lowered the voting age to 18. And then we also have things such as our federal laws, such as the Uniform and Overseas Voter Act, which has special laws specifically for our men and women who are serving overseas. And then we have the Help America Vote Act and the National Voter Registration Act. So again, as we talk about voting in our midterms and voting in those for those local races too, a lot of our election laws are also impacted at the federal level too. And so that's, again, why it's important to vote in those congressional races for our U.S. Senate seat. So, our history is very rich when it comes to voting and election laws.
Thank you so very much, Gina. That your last words really gave me an idea. We will do a show just on those amendments that you mentioned. I think it's worthwhile to review them and just to see the history of what has transpired in the voting arena in this country. I think it's just very rich and hopefully encouraging for us. Like, I come from another country. I'm a naturalized American. I obviously vote. My parents vote. Most of my siblings vote, and there's been a battle, if you will, to secure the vote, and it's worthwhile to review those laws, the Constitution. So we'll do that. I want to thank you both. I want to thank you both very much for helping us develop this topic. And remember, this is only the first one. Stay tuned. Thank you, Gina Roberts from Clean Elections.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Brendan.
Thank you.
And thank you so much, Brendan, as well. All right, we'll be back soon. Stay tuned for show number 2. Again, this is a Facebook series on Arizona Vote 2022. Did you know? Take care.